Dania now.
It's Grant Dania.
For the gold logie this year. Oh my God, it's Grant Dania.
And our mum, Shezzy Dania. She's really crazy. And George, affectionately known as Large Sarge.
It's all true.
It's All True, the podcast with Grant and Shezzy Denya.
And George.
What? You're looking at me?
Yeah, because I love you.
No,
and I'm,
yeah, but no,
I'm
I don't
looking
believe
at
you.
because you just said that my stomach was growling really loud.
And then you
so-
slurped your coffee into the microphone, which drives me crazy.
Oh, welcome to It's All True. We're still hanging on in this magical relationship
This
slash
digital relationship that we have via a podcast, which goes through various stages of healing and honesty and interventions at some points, which this next one kind of feels like it might be a bit of an intervention for me.
What, this episode?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I can't tell if it's for parents out there or is it a subtle message from Shezzy to me?
potentially. So we have this argument in our house about.
Let's call it a discussion.
Okay. Yep. Discussion. I'm quite strict on no phones in bed, and this is something that I've tried to enforce a lot. There's definitely no phones or devices from kids.
What? You are on your phone in bed all the time.
I'm not.
Don't portray the best version of yourself. Portray the most honest and truthful version of yourself.
So I have been plugging my phone in a separate room so that I have to get up in the morning to go and turn off my alarm.
That's because of your alarm and
Yes,
you don't hit snooze, not because you're not using the digital device in bed.
Okay, well, this is going really well. So I'm trying to set a really good standard for the children who every time I say to them, right, you have to get off your iPads, guys, they always say, Dad's on his phone. Yeah. Is that true? Yeah. So we have brought in the expert, the main man who deals with this all the time. Brad Marshall is the Unplugged Psychologist, and I know that, Brad, you will be able to tell us who is right and who is wrong in this argument, won't you? Please.
Yeah, well, I just walked into a minefield. G'day, Brad.
Yeah, g'day. I don't know where to start there because I definitely feel like I'm the referee in the middle of you two, so that'll be fantastic, won't it?
No, but honestly, like, I have been reading your book, okay, The Tech Diet. I'm going to hold it up here for everybody watching at home on YouTube. The Tech Diet for Your Child and Teen. A little bit alarming. I won't lie. There was a couple of things that Grant and I realised that we do that's probably not ideal.
Yeah. Well, look, we're like every parent, right? You get a moment to yourself. What do you want to do? You want to dive into your phone, have a quick squiz, see what everyone else is doing, maybe catch up on the news. But when that crosses over and starts to become too much of an impact on your life, I'm worried about the message it sends to our children. How dangerous is our phone consumption and our digital lives having on children?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a huge question, and I think what you were both sort of trying to get at before is that there are boundaries and healthy amount of use for our kids. If you divide it into sort of primary school versus high school, slightly different there. And then there's also the way that we model our use with children and the impact that has. But that increasingly in the last few years in my work has come back to, and I'm more and more convinced of this, come back to us as adults understanding how our technology is, embracing persuasive design and what that's doing to us. Because most adults, most parents that I speak to, they don't intend to use it as much as they end up doing. They're not really sure of that. And this became very evident over the COVID lockdowns. I don't want to sort of blame everything on COVID. It was a problem that was there well before. But the work-life balance just became really blurred. And I've just sort of been inundated in the last few years with companies these days, really huge organizations asking me to come and help their staff with what we call the sustainable tech diet for adults. So there's a piece there around the child and teen part that you've been reading about there, Shezzy, and then there's a piece for us as adults as well the sustainable tech diet around how we manage our own use in this modern world.
It's a bit. It's a big topic.
The technology is amazing, right? We now have the entire universe of information at the end of our hands. We're pretty much cyborgs now, right? We're one step away of having that information permanently in our head where we don't need to reach for a device. But however, it's attached to our limbs mostly permanently in our lives, right? And it's fascinating and it's incredible what it gives us the ability to do. You constantly chat with grandparents and video call them, which we weren't able to do 10 years ago. You know, if you want to know, you know, what's the true name of that worm that I see on the ground? Bang, you can get that little bit of information. You know, what's the weather going to be on Thursday when we're all going to have a picnic in the park? It's incredible what it has done to our lives. But it's the crossover point. It's such new technology, and our primitive bodies and our neurological systems have evolved a certain way. And this has only come along in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, right? The iPhone's only been around 10 years. So we're only talking about 5 to 7 years of age that we've got this access to this information. We don't yet know the long-term effects of what that's going to have on our bodies, because our bodies are not used to that amount of dopamine hits, constantly just going bang, bang, bang. We're just not built historically, you know, for this purpose. So we're not really going to know the long-term effects just yet, and they could be devastating, could they not?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, I should probably just say, Grant, I'm not sure why you're looking up worms on the ground, but anyway, if that's the way you use technology, that's a bit concerning. But look, but I think you're happening on a point here that is a really good point. There are amazing opportunities with technology, and technology is not all bad. You know, I call myself the Unplugged Psychologist, but one of the first parts of the book there is that I'm not trying to parent the children of the world. If you as a parent believe that you would like more technology, then have at it, right? It's not for everyone, and that's okay. And equally so for adults. But what we do know is that there are risks associated with that technology in physical health, in mental health, and a whole host of other things. And you're right, Grant, we don't fully understand those risks yet. Especially in Australia, we are really far behind. We are probably 10 years behind the rest of the world in the health and the impacts research, which is alarming, if you ask me, but it doesn't seem to resonate with our politicians and our policymakers. I was in Canberra at the end of 2023 at Australian Parliament House. There's one MP, Zoe McKenzie from Victoria, that is right onto this and really well read. But for the most part, the rest of them just don't care. You know, we're down there talking to them about the impacts of technology on children. And this is not theoretical anymore. We have, a whole bunch of functional MRI scan studies and brain scan studies that prove the impacts on kids. And I can go into that if you want.
Yeah,
but there just doesn't seem to be much, real appetite, especially in Australia, which is concerning. So look, I'll try and break it down really simply. I am a psychologist. I work in the clinic 2 days. I'm also a researcher at Macquarie University in the research lab there. And I write books and I do a whole host of other things, speaking stuff. But with my researcher hat on, and I give that, I guess, kind of disclaimer because I'm not the world's best researcher. I don't claim to be. But I like to think that I can provide some real life interpretation of the research, which sometimes becomes complex. So my real life reading of the research in the field of kids, if we just stick to kids and children, is that the amount of screens and gaming, and we use that term together, it's recreational screens, recreational gaming, and the amount continues to go up. So the iPhone came out in 2006, actually, Grant, you were close, but and since that time, we continue to see our access continue to go up for kids on iPads, TV, everywhere. Because I think parents get quite stuck on this idea of, well, my child never games or my child doesn't use social media. And I say, well, okay, I mean, that's fine. But if they never game, but they spend 6 hours watching other people game on YouTube, there's not a whole lot of difference there in the research, right? And so we get so fixated on specific tools, social media or YouTube or games being the devil or whatever it may be. And that's not really what's backed up in the research. So what the research says is that, there was a huge longitudinal study in the US by someone called Paulus, Paulus, if anyone wants to look it up, in 2019. And they'd had 10,000 teenagers in the US. And they did brain scan studies, functional MRI scan studies. What they found is that they could measure the brain cortex thinning prematurely in kids. So proper neurological impacts, right, over this longitudinal study when you went over 7 hours of recreational screen time a day. Now, 7 hours sounds like a huge amount, right? You sit there and go, oh, surely my kids don't do 7 hours, Well, unfortunately, in most of our research, and this is backed up by the US and the UK as well, so in the latest data that I'm releasing, and it will be released early 2024, the average Australian teenager is now on screens recreationally 9 hours a day.
Far
Oh
out.
my
Oh,
God.
Jesus.
No.
That was a study of 2,000 kids. So it's a big sample, right? That's one of the biggest samples in Australia. So, we have to look at it and go, okay, well, the average Australian teenager is now exceeding that limit of the brain cortex thinning prematurely. We also know that it has impacts on things like attention, impulse control, processing speed, all these sorts of things as well. And then there are behavioural impacts that teachers will tell you about in the classroom, right? I mean, my brother is a primary school teacher. Still not sure how, because he's sort of more kid than he is teacher. But anyway, but in his year one classes, he'll say increasingly over the last 10 years, the behavioural concerns and the difficulties with attention and concentration just continue to go up. 10 years ago, it was sort of 1 or 2 kids per class. Now it's like 5 or 6. So there are all these links that we don't know about yet for kids. And I'm passionate about the children and teen area because they are developing brains. Your brain is not fully developed, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, for boys until, you guys have girls, don't you?
Yeah, three
Okay,
beautiful girls.
3 girls. Yeah, well, there you go. So for girls, the prefrontal cortex fully develops around 21, so you're a little bit better. And that's responsible for impulse control and emotional control. But for boys, it's about early 30s. So we have to really understand that, it explains a lot, right?
Yeah.
It really does. I know my own heart of hearts. I did not start to mature till I was about 32.
I was going to say 40.
Okay, shut up.
Yeah.
You smell
I
it.
mean, look, Grant, if I'm honest, I think my wife would say the same thing if she was on this call. So, there's a reason that I crashed a few cars in uni in my early 20s, right? So,
What do you mean by the thinning of the cortex? Or the frontal cortex, I assume you mean. What does that do? How bad is that?
Well, it doesn't sound good.
No.
Sounds like
yeah.
not-
I mean, so look, we're getting on the levels of, really complex neuroscience. And so we don't actually know whether that is recoverable and what the impacts are of that. But when you get physical neurological changes in the brain, that's pretty alarming. And so we're not just talking about some of those behavioral, education, sleep, physical health impacts. They start at 2, 3, 4 hours a day, right? But the actual physiological, neurological impacts, they start at that 7 hours. So exactly what that means and whether it's reversible, I don't know. But I can tell you right now, I've got 2 kids. I've got a boy and a girl, 7 and 4. There's no way I'll let them get anywhere near that, right? If I can help it.
So that's it's brain damage. Is it brain damage?
We don't know. Potentially.
We don't know because, we don't know if it's reversible, right? And this is the issue. And in Australia, we have no research funding whatsoever. $0 to do any of this research at an Australian level. So we're only going off other Western countries, Germany, UK, US.
Is there some that's worse than others? Like we don't want to we don't want our girls to live in an Amish community where they have no access to technology and they're not connected with their friends. There's an amount of wanting to hold them back enough so they're healthy, but not isolate them and not let them move with the times, right? Because
And it's hard.
language evolves, how we communicate, just evolves. But which are the bad ones? You know what I mean? Where Instagram, obviously you go, well, comparison is the thief of joy. So the biggest culprit there is looking at other people's lives and going, well, I'm not as pretty as them. I don't have as much as them. My car's not as good as theirs. They're on a better holiday than us.
It's all device usage.
Yeah. Can you isolate them as to some are better than others, or is just all digital usage equally as damaging?
Yeah. So you can isolate that the different platforms deliver based on different persuasive design. So if I touch on that for a bit, social media typically works on things called the social comparison theory, which is what you were referring to there, Grant. So we, as psychologists, we put fancy names on things because it kind of makes us sound important, but really it's common sense, right? It's you compare yourself to others and your positives and negatives online. So most social media platforms will prey on that one. And they'll also prey on one and encompass one called the Zeigarnik effect, which is this idea that as humans, we require a logical conclusion to social interactions. We just need a logical conclusion. That's how we're wired, right? That's how our neurons are wired socially. We want to know what happened. And this is one of the issues. If you look at any of the messenger groups or social media groups, they are never ending loops, right? When we were all at school, you went home and you left the school talk at school. There was an end to the loop where you got respite neurologically and emotionally. But that's not the case anymore. And so, most of the messenger apps, even for adults, we struggle to stop looking at the pings and all these other things. So if you put social media in that group of mainly using those two, then you've got YouTube and other streaming services that use a mixture of all. But then you've got gaming, and gaming will use game design employs all these different ones: the fun failure effect, the near miss effect, which is that idea that you can get so close to finishing something and fall just short, and you still get a really cool dopamine hit, right? And by cool, I mean scary, right? So essentially, alarm bells still go. You've lost a game, but you still win. It's as we know, it's a strategy used by the gambling industry in the 80s and 90s. So there's also increasing levels of AI that are taking over the gaming world. So what I mean by that is, in any game, whether it's for a 7-year-old or whether it's for a 40-year-old, and it's not just the violent ones, not just the shooter ones, right? If you look at Roblox, which is one that is a common platform for most kids.
Yep.
Oh no, I've hit a nerve in the Denya house. I'll just add your 3 girls to the list of kids that hate me around the country anyway. So that's a common theme. Yeah. But as far as Roblox or any of these gaming platforms, they use AI and they can tell when a player is starting to wane in their interest in the game. So if they start to play for an hour or two, what they measure is things like their stroke rate and their response rate. And if they start to slow in their response times, typically games are designed to give them something that will draw them back into that state of flow. So if you think about it, it's like a loot box or there's a reward and they go, oh my gosh, how'd you get that? That's incredible. You got that great new weapon or you got something. And it's not luck. Yeah, it's by design. The game knows that they're losing your attention and they will drop that in there. So it's becoming more and more sophisticated. And then, of course, we have the world of VR headsets, Apple goggles, all these different things that are coming. And we're so far behind. We do studies on the technology that is from 5 or 10 years ago. And it just takes us forever to be able to catch up.
God, our kids love Roblox. I always call it Robux.
Because that's what we reward them with, right? Because that's the only currency they care about.
That's the currency, yeah.
And it's really scary because when I was reading, like in your book, and I was looking at gaming, I was thinking, gosh, I'm so glad I'm not a parent of a boy because that sounds dreadful. And then I thought, oh, shit, our girls play Roblox. I can never say it. And that's a number of things. That's gaming. It's clearly addictive because and I'm quite strict in weekdays at school days. They can't use iPads all during the week. I'm the worst parent in the world because we get thousands of calls from all the other kids through Kids Messenger or whatever.
Popping up on all our devices, wanting them to play games together.
But they're not allowed to use it. But in holidays, they're allowed to use their devices in the morning. And I noticed that the girls will start to get up a little bit earlier just so that they can play on Roblox before, we have to go to work and we need them to get off the Wi-Fi. So they are gamers.
Yeah, whereas Roblox, it feels like it's kind of just a playground where they go in there and they can build things. It's kind of like it feels like it's sold like a digital Lego almost, right? So you go, oh, where's the harm in that? But you're right. If they're using AI, they're biohacking us to keep us engaged. You have no chance.
Yeah, and what's even more scary is the amount of influencers and public people now that are being asked to advertise gaming to younger and younger kids. I have a friend who he and his daughter are sort of YouTube famous, and they, have been approached by younger and younger gaming markets where they're targeting kids that are sort of 6 to 9. And that to me is really scary. Just they're trying to get bigger, more attention and whatnot from those younger and younger markets. So, yeah, I mean, I guess my version or my take on gaming and social media in general is that there is a magical age at 18, if you want to call it that. Now, neurologically, you're not really, capable of making good decisions at that age. But for all these other things, whether we look at diet or alcohol or any of these other things, we do, even driving, we do limit until they have a certain brain capacity, neurological capacity to make better decisions. But for some reason with social media and with gaming, there's not really any limits. I mean, even if you look at the social media limit, there's this arbitrary sort of wait until you're 12 or 13, which has no scientific evidence, by the way. That was just a purely legal. Some legal person in the US came up with that age limit. Like, it's based on nothing. And so, but as you were saying, Shezi, one of the concerning things is, and I wrote about this in my book, which obviously was from 2019. It's getting worse now. It's harder for parents now since COVID and the blur of lines of where screens are and not at school. But what you're finding is that kids will have their sleep impacted. It's a very common thing for younger kids to get up earlier. And I write about that in my book. And then you've got the older kids typically will stay up later. And then you've got a small percentage of kids, I don't want to overplay it, at the sort of real pointy end that will, set an alarm for 12 so they can grind, they call it, grind until, 3 or 4, because that's a time when their parents are not going to know. So in the tech diet for your child and teen, I take parents through educational impacts, behavioral, social, emotional, and health meaning sleep, exercise, etc. And that's the way that I like to look at it, is what other areas of their life are being impacted through this. And if we just look at some of the data here around how many parents should be worried, it is, we've done 3 studies now in Australia on how many kids have gaming disorder. It's defined by the World Health Organization. It's 3% of kids, 2 to 3%. And so if you look at the amount of Australian school kids, there's about 4 or 5 million in the latest Bureau of Statistics. So you're talking about 120,000 kids that have a diagnosable gaming disorder in Australia. And we do nothing. There's no help for this whatsoever. And then on top of that, we also looked at smartphone addiction, and we know that it's about 10 to 15% of kids have a smartphone addiction. And the most concerning part of that in my last set of surveys was that it was about 5% of primary school kids. So bizarre to me that 5% of primary school kids have a smartphone addiction when they're not even supposed to have a phone.
Yeah.
What is the age for? What's the appropriate age for a smartphone? Because I know parents, we kick this around all the time and we don't want to give it too early. But I don't know, is there an ideal target?
So,
18?
yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, the later the better, right? But I do acknowledge what you were saying, Grant, that quite often kids become socially ostracized. It's the way that they socialize. It's the way that they organize things. So it can become really difficult. But parents then often use that as a reason, or the safety reason. I need to know where they are. They need to communicate with me, which I don't really buy, if I'm honest with you. There are ways around that. But if you look at the social reason, it's difficult for parents because if you buy that phone, and it's around Christmas now, parents that have bought the phone for kids, probably the worst idea, because as soon as you give them that phone, it's their device, right? How do you take that away then? It's theirs. So, typically we talk about putting the training wheels on. There are safer devices. So, for example, there's a GME phone. I have no affiliation with GME or any tech company, by the way, but it's an Australian-made phone. It's a smartphone that has no camera, and it allows you to lock things down easier. Because what many parents would have found is that the parental controls on most phones and software and games are laughably easy to get around. Really easy.
And
so parents can go, well, of course. I mean, they're digital natives, our kids, right? But you do have to ask yourself, like, why do we make all these amazing phones with screen time and all these parental controls and they're so easy to get around? Attention is money, right? So I think that it's difficult for parents, if I'm just giving them a bit of a break here, they go into it with good intentions. I can get this phone and I can set up the parental software. They don't understand that most of the time it doesn't work.
Well, we've got plenty of friends who say, "Don't you put the Wi-Fi lock out?" And I say, "No, I just make sure that my kids are really scared of me that they don't do it."
Shezzy's from the I still beat my children with a wooden spoon kind of parenting.
Yeah, which will kind of work until they're teenagers, Shezzy.
Yeah, I know.
We got a little watch for our 8-year-old. There's no way in the world we're going to get her a phone yet. We went down the path of one of those little watches where they can text you and they can video call you,
but only at certain times.
Yeah, so not during class hours, and so that sort of answers that safety aspect. Yet she's not able to engage, in any form of social media, and
no,
like you said, there's no camera on it.
But even that, she calls repeatedly.
Usually while we're recording a podcast.
Yeah, and I have seen other messages from other kids where I think, oh, what are their parents like? What are they? They just have no idea. Because when you look at the messages on Kids Messenger, and which I often do to see what my kids have been, sending, and I'll talk to them about it. And there could be like 34 missed calls from a child, and I think, and so I always then try to have the discussion with my kids. But as you said earlier, it's different when they become teenagers. I've got friends who have teenagers. I've got nieces and nephews. They all have smartphones. A lot of their parents have said that they're addicted to Snapchat, which scares the crap out of me. And they will take their phones off them as punishment, and there will be this huge meltdown.
Because you're taking a drug off a drug addict.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what's happening, and they lose their little minds.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common one that I go through in that book, and then also the new book, How to Say No to Your Phone, is for teens and tweens to learn about this stuff. It's sort of very visual and has lots of pretty pictures. Yeah, there you go. And that'll come out in about a dozen countries next year: the US, UK, South Korea, Mexico, like all sorts of different countries. And that one's supposed to be designed really, what we had in mind is for that to even be a co-read. If you buy that for your sort of 12-year-old, 14-year-old, 10-year-old, to go through that with them, and try to share some of those experiences along the way. I'm under no impression that a 10-year-old is going to read that and go, oh, geez, okay, well, here you go, Mum, here's my phone. It's very rare that they're going to be able to do that. But as you pointed out, removing a phone physically or any device is really, really tricky. And the more they ramp up and become, and the reason for that, by the way, is it's not just the removal of the dopamine, as Grant was saying. It's also because when we get in this flow state, whether it be games or social media or YouTube or whatever it may be, and this is the reason that most, YouTube shorts and Instagram shorts and all these are going shorter and shorter with their clips, is because they get you in the flow state for longer. But fundamentally what happens there is you move to sort of the back part of your brain, where you're more using fight or flight rather than the front part, the prefrontal cortex, where you're using, good decision making and impulse control. And so essentially you're taking a device physically away from them. And you should expect, whether it be for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, it's going to take them a while to move back to the prefrontal cortex and the better part of their brain. And so, it's not a personal thing. I try to get this message across to parents, right, when I'm doing parent talks at schools or even in the clinic, that if your kids react poorly to the boundaries that you put around them, it's not a personal attack on you as a parent. They are the victims of this. At the end of the day, if we put technology in front of them, and my kids have it too, right? I'm not saying we're off grid somewhere, but we have to just understand that their reaction is purely, in response to the persuasive design that these products have.
Yeah, they're entrapped in the web.
That's such a great way to look at it.
Are we seeing the death of mindfulness with these devices? We talk about, if you have done any work on yourself, you are aware of the power of mindfulness in wrestling the control back from your monkey brain, getting yourself back in the moment where your thoughts are not controlling you. whether that be, you're taking a moment to have a look around, you're listening to the sounds of the environment, you're having a look at the shapes of clouds, hearing the birds in the background, regrounding yourself in the moment. It feels like any spare moment they have now is snatched by a digital device, right? So there is no slowing of the brain. There's no stopping in the moment. There's no grounding on the earth. We're losing that ability. That their brain is just, the gears are grinding 24/7 at a faster rate than ever. So his mindfulness, we know how important it is for mental health.
Yep.
It feels like it's gone.
Yeah, I think first of all, what I would say about mindfulness is that, for people out there that are not into mindfulness, it doesn't have to be the woo-woo sort of version of that. People do things mindfully without realizing it, right? You can go for a run, and that is a mindful act if you're doing that, because you are being very observant of all of your senses, and that creates respite. I think if we get away from picking on kids for a little bit here, we should probably recognize that even adults are struggling with this. So I did a workshop recently at a huge organization, and we delivered the sustainable tech diet to this organization with 11,000 staff and over 1,000 people tuned in from around Australia and Pacific. It was one of the largest attendances they've had, just because you can see how much technology taking over home and work is stressing people out. It's burning them out. And so typically what I say in that workshop is we need to learn how to harvest technology and not let technology harvest us. And that is the challenge for us as parents if we are modeling that for our kids. So I'm not saying we all need to go off grid, but we have to model for them. How are we harvesting technology so that we get what we need, but not letting it take over us? And a workshop attendee recently said to me at the end, she said, these are very intelligent people. She said, one of the things I took from your workshop was that I was walking the dog every morning on the beach, and it's one of my favorite parts of the day. But since COVID, I started taking my phone, not just to listen to music, but I ended up, on Instagram or checking work emails or on LinkedIn or on any of these things. And just listening to you talk, I wasn't even aware that that's what I was doing. And it had turned out that it wasn't really an enjoyable activity for me anymore. It wasn't a mindful activity, right, Grant? Walking your dog on the beach is a very mindful thing if you do it properly. But she just turned it into, for the last 2 years, without even realizing, just turned it into a complete work can't switch off mode. And so we talked about how to solve that for her at her level, right? But if you wind it all the way back to kids then and answer your question, one of the concerns here is that kids are supposed to develop abilities in emotional control and all sorts of social control as well, around reading emotions, reading social cues, and all of these fantastic things that you learn through being mindful, just being present. Yeah. So if you take the classic sitting at a restaurant pub with your kids, it would be far easier for me to give my 7-year-old daughter and my 4-year-old son a device. Oh no, have I hit a nerve here, Shazzy? Is that why you're...
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's just...
Am I gonna get in between the Denya? Okay, well I'll give you my version anyway, and then you can tell what you do. But it would.
We're on board. We're on board.
Yeah.
Okay, it would be far easier for me. I would have a much more enjoyable time talking to my wife and having a drink if we did that. Right, hands down, I would. But the problem is that that's a time when they have to learn how to be patient, how to sit with their emotions of I want my food and I want it now, and they probably need to be doing other things. So we need to learn from a very young age. And neurologically, what happens there is at age about 2 or 3, you start pruning your neurons. So think about it. In the first 2 years, you have this burst of neurons, all these like little dangly parts in your brain, and they connect. See, I told you I wasn't a good researcher. I just sort of put it in common sense stuff. And so the dangly bits connect. The dangly bits connect. And then essentially from about age 2 or 3, they start pruning. It is a use it or lose it scenario for everything, from mathematics to a language through to your social awareness, reading emotions, how to be patient. And so you have to learn that from age 2 through to whatever age. And so if you give a child a phone at age 8 and then you say, have at it, and there are no restrictions and there is no boundaries, and they go down that rabbit hole and we expect nothing from them. And every time they're upset, we just let them watch YouTube. Every time they're angry about something, we let them go online. They're not using any parts of those brain neurologically that they need. And this is one of the issues that we have. It's a use it or lose it neurologically one. We've known this for decades. And so parents that say, well, I need that device, I need that iPad because it helps my child, with emotion control and everything like that. I mean, sure, it does, it'll work, but they're never going to develop neurologically or otherwise the skills that they need in that sort of mindfulness space to be able to manage their emotions. So it's a really long-winded way of getting back to you there, Grant. Sorry.
No, it's so interesting because we were only talking about this today. So our eldest is 12, and so she kind of came about before the whole, smartphone device. We didn't really use it as much, and so we would go to restaurants, and she would sit there and she would chat and color in and do the normal things that
or just
kids
listen
do.
and observe and kind of see how adults interact and hear different levels of conversation. Yeah.
And then our
Yep.
second child came along who was wild and would climb everything and run away. And it was disastrous for a number of years, but she was soothed by giving her a device.
At least we could go out, right, as a family unit. And yes, one had a device, but at least she was contained. She wasn't ruining the restaurant experience for everybody else in the restaurant.
Yeah.
But we also sense the judgment from everybody else looking at us. But it was either that or not go out, right?
Yeah.
So,
and sometimes that wasn't an option because we had to go to various, events, work things. So, but I do notice that she always says to me, I'm bored. I'm bored.
Yeah.
She's either flat out climbing on everything or she needs a device.
I'm dopamine hungry is probably what she's trying to say.
I mean, that, but also just curious, right? At the end of the day, if we look back 20 years ago, kids were allowed to be a lot more adventurous, right? You go to a pub or a restaurant or whatever, and you could kind of let them wander a bit more. I don't know. We're much more cautious, me included, about safety and things these days. And I don't want to come across like I'm being self-righteous or everything's perfect. I am far from perfect. There are times where my family, my kids get more screens than they should. Typically, if you ever see me at the airport, you guarantee they're going to be on screens because that is just meltdown central, right? But I encourage parents to think about just using it sparingly and being selective. And so as long as that's not an everyday thing and as long as that's not a constant, then you'll probably be okay. If you're going on a long road trip, it's okay to have more screens. We don't have to be perfect. But if that turns into every single day, that's their only way of curing boredom or their only way of managing their emotions and social stuff, it's probably not developing them into the human that you want them to be.
And what is the biggest or the most, I guess, popular problem that you see in your clinic?
As in behavioural, effects.
Yeah.
Do you want the extremes? Yeah. So I should preface this by saying at the Screens and Gaming Disorder Clinic, we're the oldest clinic of such. We've been open for over 10 years now, and it's been sort of 90% of my work for the last 10 years. I mean, I kind of feel like sometimes I don't do just regular psychology stuff anymore. It's all screens and gaming stuff. But it is the extreme end, okay? It is the 1% to 3%. So please don't take this as every child. There's everything in between. But typically what we'll see are kids who are either, missing school, have school refused, upwards of 2 or 3 years. I've seen kids that haven't been to school in 2 or 3 years.
What?
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty common. And again, common meaning in my world, not common in the real world. But if you speak to any teacher or principal, they'll tell you that there are quite a few kids. The main reason that I get called into schools is because they've got, 2 to 3% of the grade that just miss either massive chunks or just haven't been in a year or two. Because if the home life is so good and you can game and you can do whatever you need to do, then theoretically you're getting all your social needs met. Why do I need to go to school, right? And then the other red flags there are sleep. I mean, finding kids up at night or spending money on credit cards. Certainly the spending money part that you guys touched on before. The typical one is sort of microtransaction. It's sort of $3 here, $5 there because you've left a credit card linked to something and it adds up to be $200 or $300. But I've seen kids that have spent upwards of sort of $40,000 or $50,000 on gaming. So we won't get into sort of logistically how that happened. But anyway, And
We met someone last weekend whose kids on Roblox had just kept buying more Robux just because they didn't understand the
It
value.
was a couple of grand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
so some of them it's because you don't understand the value, but for a lot of them, even when you explain it, it just, again, it's like it's sitting right in front of you. It's like, it's kind of like being at a resort where everything gets charged to the room, right? If you tell your 7-year-old that milkshakes are on the my 7-year-old is going to be ordering chocolate milkshakes every time I leave her. So it's sort of like that. Even if you explain the value, it's all funny money to them. But the other common ones are when it's impacting education in areas like they're not handing in any assignments, not doing their work, or unfortunately when devices get taken away, if a child is really struggling, whether it be with a phone or gaming. At the extreme end, again, it can be physical aggression and violence. So holes in walls, things being thrown, police coming out, AVOs, all sorts of stuff down that track. Yeah.
Far out. Yeah.
So I've been called in a few times. Yeah, I've been called in a few times to police stations where the commanders are saying to me, look, we respond to domestic violence calls and we don't know what to do. What do we do? So hats off to them because they don't get any training in it, unfortunately. So
Yeah. It's such a big issue. It really is, isn't it, Grant?
Yeah,
It's what we model to our kids.
Yeah, and I think you're right. That it feels like the first path to correcting control in your house and leading by a good example is going, and because you use this example about that lady walking along the beach and just checking Instagram and checking her emails and LinkedIn, and you think you grab your phone for micro moments. Okay, the kids have wandered outside. I'll have a quick look. But the only way to truly understand how much it's actually penetrated your time is to have a look at how many hours of screen time that you've got, because we lie to ourselves. And I must admit, I think my consumption is so much lower than it actually is. And then I'm disgusted when I get on there and go 7 hours of usage. And you go, I don't remember 7 hours. Where did that come from? But then that's the only way to catch yourself. And that's the only way to realize, hang on, I'm using this without even know I'm using it. And it's accumulating time. And my kids are seeing me do that. So it feels like that's kind of the first stop. Be honest with yourself of your own consumption. And then you can start to then truthfully observe others and then start to take the control back of usage. Because we all lie. We all lie to ourselves.
Yeah, we do lie to ourselves. That's a really good point, Grant. And that 7 hours on your phone, we should also remember that doesn't include, an iPad or a computer or a TV or whatever it may be as well, right? So that's just your phone. And I think that you're right. We all need to have conversations about how none of us are perfect. And I talk about this in my corporate workshops because I try to get over to people here that after 15 years of living in the academic and the clinical world in this and knowing everything that I know about persuasive design, which I would hazard a guess is slightly more than the average person, I still struggle with it. I really do. I find it difficult. I constantly have to audit my own device use. That's what I call it, auditing your own use. And implement new strategies, which is what I call harvesting, implementing new strategies there, because for us as adults, we struggle. So I'll give you an example. I was running a workshop recently with what I call a harvest tree, which is like a decision-making tree, right? But harvest tree sounds so much better. And it takes you through all these steps of like asking you, each device or each platform. And so I was reading out to this group, this one about emails, so it goes something like, off the top of my head, are you checking emails outside of work hours? Yes or no? Do you need to check those outside of work emails? Is it going to change the outcome if you don't? And so if the answer is no, then we need to turn off any notifications and pings and all these sorts of things. And we keep going down the list, and essentially, it says, do you even need that on your phone? So for me, for example, my research lab emails were on my phone, and I sat there in the workshop going, why am I getting a million emails on my phone about a research lab that when I'm not there, I'm not there. I don't need to be there, right? And it's just stressing me out. And so I deleted the email box from my phone. But I try to keep it a bit humorous as well, because at the end I say, if you've just said yes to all these things and you need to be on 24/7, then you're either in the CIA or you're a cyborg and you need to look at it again, right? It's not the reality of it. And so I've taken to doing all sorts of different things. On my social media, I can tell you, for work, my team manages most of my social media, and I only personally have 20 minutes a day. Now, I set up screen time for 20 minutes, and what do you think I did? I just kept putting in the screen time password, right? Because, I've just got to send that. I've got to message Shezzy, because she's talking to me about a podcast. And so so in the end, my wife has my screen time password now. And it's pretty embarrassing because anytime that I need to get on there to send something, I've got to go to her. She's like, you've gone over your time again, haven't you? Yes, So there are things that even I have to do. It doesn't matter how much I know about this world. These devices and the persuasive design and the algorithms are so powerful that they will suck you in if you use them.
And it's so funny because I love that, because Grant and I use our devices for different things. And so I kind of have always looked down my nose. I'm like, he's reading the news. He loves scrolling. He loves doing all this. Whereas
I like finding out if UFOs are true. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
It's a judgment-free zone.
And he always knows the most random facts, but that's obviously because that's what he's doing. Whereas
about worms, right? Worms.
Yeah, about worms. Whereas what I do is important because I'm available 24/7. So I only ever use my phone for work and productivity. This is the mentality that I have, but that's just as bad.
Bullshit. You're also lying.
I'm not lying. I'm like, I'm not a person to sit and scroll for ages, but I'll sit and shop.
I can see you commenting on other people's Instagram pages that we are both members of.
Because I have a thing that my manager told me about algorithm. When you put up posts, you have to have commented on 5 pages. So I try and do that a week.
For you to appear in other people's field of vision.
Because if you notice,
and this is the problem. Yeah, this is the problem. I agree. I mean, in my team, I've got a fantastic operations manager that knows a lot about social media and all the rest of it. And it's a similar issue. And I just found that I just couldn't do it. I couldn't live a healthy life and do that. And so I had to farm it out. That's a very fortunate thing to be able to do. I'm not, and when people message me, they're still getting me. It's the most inefficient way you could ever imagine. There are people that will message me with comments or whatnot, and my team have to put it in an email to me to respond, right? It's crazy. But yeah, and then they type it, right? But it just, I couldn't find another way because it was intruding on my personal and my family life, which I'm very clear that I want to be there for my kids. I mean, for example, if you see me, one of my most treasured times is my kids do nippers on a Sunday morning. It's just my favorite time because they look like they're having so much fun, and secretly I think I have more fun than they do. But I didn't want to use my phone down there, and so I bought an Apple Watch and took everything off it. I mean, I stripped every single thing off it possible. I can get a message, I can get a phone call. It's kind of like your kid's smartphone, your kid's watch, your little ones. I probably should have just bought one of those. It would have been cheaper. Can you imagine me walking around with one of those kids watches? But it just does the very basics so that I'm not even tempted to be distracted by that hour and a half that I really need to be present.
You've just reminded me, one of the things that, and I've mentioned this to Shezzy several times, that really infuriates me because her Apple Watch is constantly pinging with emails and text messages or whatever the hell's coming through her phone. And I'll be
Grant's emails,
chatting to her. I'll be looking her in the eye, telling her a story about whatever happened to me during the day or some sort of general theory that I've come up with, whatever it is that I'm bullshitting on about. But she'll break concentration from me and then check her watch, see what's coming in, and she'll evaluate whether that requires any further action or attention. And and then she'll come back to me and I'll go, you just left me mid-sentence to see if something else was more important than what I was talking about. Do you know how hurtful that actually is? And it makes me very sad. But she's got a strong muscle memory that's very hard for her to break, that when that goes bing, she requires a physical response. And that just, it breaks the connection that we have in the rare moments where we can talk about adult things without other little kids around. And it just it hurts.
So as adults, Grant, if we're auditing our own technology use, right? If we look at that, we've all been conditioned to respond to the pings and all the rest of it. Yeah. And it's much more complicated than that, right? I mean, everyone thinks, oh, I just turn notifications off my phone and everything's fine. No, that's just the start. But there are studies out there that 40 or 50% of people responded that they get ghost pings from their watches or their phones, right? So that is, and I've had this happen to me. I don't know if you guys have. Have you ever had like it's in your pocket, it's in your purse, and you look at it because you think it's vibrated or you think it's gone off, but it hasn't?
Yeah.
Also, it hasn't gone off, or it has gone off, but
No.
it's
There's
something.
No, it hasn't. It's a ghost ping. So your body is telling you that you felt the vibration or the ping, and you respond just like Shezi does, as you were talking about, but there's nothing there, right? And so it's what they call ghost notifications. So 40 or 50% of people have experienced that. I have as well, right? I'm just reading this study, just going, oh man, I'm one of those 40%, because that's how conditioned we are to that. If you hear anything that even sounds like a vibration, it conditions us. And so it's really difficult, because when we're looking at our own use as adults and how we combat that, we do have to make conscious decisions. Okay, so let's take I really don't want to get into the realm of getting in between the two of you and your bedtime routines here, but with the phones in the bedroom, the issue there is really difficult, because if the phone is next to us, we're conditioned to hear a ping or even see it light up, right? At 1 o'clock in the morning, when my mates are all talking about football, English Premier League football and everything, because we play fantasy league, they're all up until stupid hours watching it. I'm conditioned to look at that. So I have to charge my phone on the other side of the room, because then again, I've got to do like this walk of shame where my wife catches me walking to the other side of the room to pick up my phone if I want to get it. And so that's enough to stop me from just grabbing it. But otherwise, I know if it's sitting next to me, I understand that the Zeigarnik effect, the social comparison theory, and the conditioning of the pings, I'm going to pick it up. Even everything that I know, I will pick it up, right? So we do have to take steps like that.
That's exactly what happens to me if I have my phone next to my bed. So I'm ADHD, and I'm a workaholic, and I manage all our business, and if an email comes in at 1:30 a.m. in the morning and I have to put my phone on flight mode, and I have to plug it in away from the bed, because if it goes bing and has a certain vibration or noise, I will then wake up automatically and go straight into work mode and reply to that email in the middle of the night. I'm guilty of that. There you go.
Absolutely. And it's not just about social media and gaming, right? It's about workplaces. And this is one of the issues for parents that I saw over COVID. For many years, organizations asked me to come in and speak, and I would just say, no, I'm trying to help kids. And then I realized this is an issue that parents have to model at home. And if they don't know it, then how do they help their kids? And so it was only 2 or 3 years ago that I saw that. I mean, in my clinic, it's a screens and gaming disorder clinic, right? And I would have parents coming in, and in the waiting room, they'd be on like a Teams call or a Zoom call or whatever for work. And they say, just 1 minute, I'm on this, but I'll mute myself, and then sit in a consultation with an earbud in. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is bizarro world. Like, what are we doing right now? I just, it's so strange. Yeah. And it's not just in a clinical sense, right? I think if you find how many people feel pressured to do that at random hours at night, I've got families and I guess workers that have told me that they'll sit through family dinner with one earpod in because they've got to be in this important meeting, but they still want to do family dinner, and they're on mute, and they're on, and their videos off. And the lines of work and home are completely blurred. And I think that the technology that was rolled out over COVID, as you're saying, Shezi, that just even for you, it's really hard to know where to draw that line now.
Yeah, well, we must admit we're not part of a conventional office space working environment. We're in a different industry, and we work very differently. So, and I know that's how most, and a lot of people work, but it's not something we're familiar with. But we both have friends who sort of work in a regular office, and yes, they're constantly just on Zoom calls all the time.
Yeah,
but it's not something that we're quite familiar with to talk about. But it does. God, we feel like it feels like we're just mice in a digital laboratory, and they're just drip feeding us, and they're playing games with us, and we're responding, and we're doing exactly what they want us to do, when it comes to this online addiction. And it feels, God, sometimes it can feel overpowering, and you can feel
Yeah.
helpless, and it feels like we have no power.
But I think that's what's so good about the stuff that you have in this book and also in your new
Name
book,
them if
which
you're
are
listening to the podcast, not watching on YouTube. Yeah,
sorry.
The Tech Diet for Your Child and Teen by Brad Marshall, the Unplugged Psychologist.
Yeah, I just loved. It's so easy to read.
Well,
as
it's a
well.
7-step plan, Shezzy, to
Oh, yeah.
unplug and reclaim your kid's childhood and save your family's sanity.
Because I love that you even for one part you've basically just exactly what we said. Well, we had games when we were kids, and we never got addicted. And you just answer questions before, or statements before we've even said them in each chapter, which was great.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen thousands of families in the clinic, and so it's really easy for me to know what the common, I guess, misconceptions are there. And what I really aimed to do in that book was to make sure that I didn't come across like I was, standing on some pedestal and preaching at people, because I think that's very unhelpful for parents. At the end of the day, parents are so stressed. There's so many things competing for their attention, and so I can understand how they end up in this situation. Even with the best intentions. But it's really difficult to balance all of that these days, isn't it? So we try to keep it lighthearted in that book. And again, it's not for everyone. There are certain people out there that will say that, one of the common ones that I hear more lately is, well, Brad, the world's going down this path of technology, and so my kids need to learn how to manage technology, right? They need to learn. By the time they're 18, they need to learn how to manage their own technology. Well, what I say to that is, if you look at the analogy of food, would you let your kids pick what they're going to eat for dinner? Because I can tell you right now, what would your kids pick? If you said open house, what are we getting? What would they pick?
McDonald's chips.
Yeah, chips.
Yeah, that's it. Nuggies.
Ice cream.
My kids call it the nuggie shop. I don't know why. Anyway, but maybe that was me. But it would be crap, right? I mean, and so we can teach them about a healthy use, but at the end of the day, they're still going to pick an unhealthy use, most of them. And so it is our job to put boundaries around them and protect their prefrontal cortex and everything else and the neurons that are going on in their development. That's our job from a physical diet perspective and also from a digital diet. It's really, really difficult. But, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I don't want it to come across like, oh my gosh, I mean, I know you said, Grant, we're just guinea pigs on a hamster wheel. There is power in knowledge here. And I think that if people can understand what's going on, then you can make better informed decisions about the way that you do your own work and interact with technology, but also the way that your kids do. There's a reason that, and I put this up on social media a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you saw this, Shezzy, but the CEO of TikTok in the USA interviewed. Did you see this? So he came out. This interviewer was. I'll send it to you. This interviewer was saying, "Do your kids use TikTok?" Now, he's the CEO of TikTok in America. And he said, no, they don't. And the interviewer said, why? Oh, they're too young. How old are they? Oh, they're 10 and 7. They're far too young, right? They're just far too young for that. And that gives you a very good idea. The amount of tech people that don't let their kids have phones and or social media is amazing. And that should tell us everything we need to know.
All the designers who are responsible for the creation of the platforms and how they work and how they interact with you and how they are engaged and how they draw you in, they all refuse to allow their Silicon Valley is full of them. They're where they're just kids aren't allowed to use them. Which is exactly right, because it's a trap. And it's and look, and it is hard. You're right. I love your example that digital devices are a sometimes food. I think that's a perfect way to look at it. When you go to your kids, okay, there's everyday food and sometime food. If you look at it as a sometime food, well, then it makes so sense. And it feels achievable. It feels within reach. It instantly makes sense. And it feels like there's power in that. But the other thing I noticed too is, we're also, all of us are now have dual parenting, as in dual workforce homes where both parents are now working. And that historically hasn't really been a strong thing before. Now to be able to afford a home, to be able to afford to live, to afford groceries and afford our mortgage and afford the repayments on our car, both parents need to be working. And that's almost a newer construct of the family environment. So it feels like we just don't have as many eyes on them as we used to have, because we're just working harder too, right?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a difficult one because it's hard for me to have any concept on that. I grew up in a family in the 80s in the inner Western Sydney where both my parents worked full time and we're both career people. So I don't know any different, if I'm honest. I think that in the 80s and 90s, even early 2000s, there was a lot more freedom, just I know it's cliche, but ride your bike up and down the street, go and play handball, go to your mate's house down the street. And that's more difficult to do now, right? I mean, we find ourselves having to, be more careful about that. But I do agree with you as well. The financial pressures in Australia, anyone will know with housing and things like that, it all plays a role in this, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not looking to make excuses, but yeah, I'm just trying to sort of
So
identify some of the differences that parents are also facing now, and trying to sympathise as well.
Yeah.
With their struggles.
What are you going to change?
It's a sometimes food. It's a sometimes food, guys.
Are you going to stop using your phone at night in bed and in the morning when you wake up?
because I'm guilty of going, well, here's 5 minutes to myself. I'll treat myself by checking in and seeing what's on. Yeah, I'll stop doing that. I know that's leading a bad example. I've got a lot of behaviours to change, and I get that.
I'm not going to wear my watch whenever I'm having lunch with Grant.
I'm going to run over it with the car. That's what I'm going
to do. Do you know what? We should turn this into a bit of an experiment. How about I check in with you guys in like 3 months and we see who could do it?
Ooh.
Yes.
This is good.
Because we're both highly competitive.
Okay, so what are we actually doing here? So what are we actually doing, Shezzy? You're doing what with your smartphone?
I am going to only use it within certain hours per day. So, because my issue is work related. Like I could just work 24/7. So I'm going to only use it between the hours of 9 and 9 because I've.
Okay, 9 and 9. So 12 hours. 12 hours it'll be off or taken off your person, or.
Yep, it'll be put on airplane mode from 9 o'clock until 9 a.m. in the morning.
I'm going to cut my screen time by 2/3, and I'm not going to use it in bed. And I'm not going to let my kids see me use it in bed. I'm not going to use it in bed.
So the 2/3 part is actually measurable here. I'm interested in that part, Grant, right? So are you going to give us a baseline? Are you going to get out your phone right now and tell us? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I want to get that.
Go and get your phone.
I don't know where it is. Okay, get it.
Yeah, this will be interesting. Yeah, but there's specific apps that Grant uses that he's on a lot more. Oh, it's so funny. Grant has built the kids a massive cardboard fort, so he can't. You can't get in or out of the office quickly. You have to go through a tiny door that has been cut out of cardboard.
Surely you've got to post a picture of the cardboard fort to this episode as well, can we? Because I'm most interested in that. No.
The cardboard house is
it's amazing.
It's annoying.
Did you put a slide on it, Grant? Because I've seen some people do cardboard slides downstairs. Have you seen those?
Oh
yeah, I used to do it on a wooden tray with my sister when I was a kid.
There you go.
Yesterday I was.
Just look it up. Well, yeah. So Grant never replies. Everybody who knows Grant, they know he never ever replies to messages, and he's never available actually on the phone. Like no one can ever ring him. So
actually, it's pretty good.
So they can't. So hang on, they can't ring you or text you, but your screen time is out of control.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I don't know, I have a stress response when people text me, and if I go, I don't have a great immediate answer, I'll come back to that, and then I never come back to that. But yeah, okay, it's actually better than I thought it was going to be. It's 4 hours and 48 minutes, which is 18% down from last week.
So you're talking about this week's was 4 hours and 48 minutes? No, or per day?
Yeah.
Daily average.
Yeah.
Daily average. Okay. So what do you want to get that down to, Grant? When we check in like 2 or 3 months, what are we going to get that down to?
That's down because yesterday I was unable to be on my phone because I was
racing.
I was testing race cars. But last Wednesday was 7.5 hours.
What are we going to get the average weekly down to, do you reckon? What's your goal? 2 hours. You want to be under 2 hours?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
This is during holidays. Is this possible during holidays?
Yeah. What?
Oh,
I suppose-
Oh,
my
now
data
I've
more
got.
detail.
Yeah, here we go. So Instagram, 43 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's today. 43 minutes today. How have you had?
He must have been researching. He must have been researching for this, Shezzy, I
Oh
think.
my
Yeah,
Right,
I
Grant?
was looking at Brad Marshall and just
Yeah.
I'm just looking how he goes about his
Oh my
social
God.
media strategy.
So you can actually find out.
Hey, stop looking.
Oh my gosh. You can go through per day for
Yeah.
everybody watching on YouTube. You can go through 1 hour 42 on Instagram.
Well,
But as Graham was saying, most of us don't do that, right? Because we're very, we just would rather stick our head in the sand. So I think you should pick something realistic, Grant. Are you going for sub 2 hours a day on average?
Yeah, is that 2 hours? Oh my God, it gets worse. It's like,
all right, this is the intervention-y
So-
part that I was mentioning at the start.
yeah, so I don't even know what that means. So like time on social devices,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
so funny because
2 hours, 20 minutes. Information and reading. So I assume that's kind of news sites, 1 hour and 14, and other 1 hour and 3. Yeah, look,
Oh.
7 hours, I must admit, can be quite regular. So I'm happy to. Yeah, I know. Look, this is embarrassing, but you
No.
should probably look at yours.
But you
before
know what I was just
talk.
thinking? I never close tabs until the end of the day. So
No, I
mine's
don't.
always
I love the excuse. The excuses are coming out now,
Yes.
Shezzy.
But does that do
It'd be
anything?
engagement. No, it wouldn't be just whether.
No, I don't think it does. I think it's proactive. Yeah, but look, I think that you should pick something that's pretty realistic, Grant. If there are days where you're doing 7 hours,
2 days of 7 hours, shares sucked in.
I did have 2 days of 7 hours.
See, this is the honesty thing I'm talking about because we have a perception
Oh, here you go.
Yeah.
No,
of how much we
text
consume.
messages, 6 hours.
That's a chip.
of that 7.
Yeah.
So really,
Most
really
of
what it
them
comes
were
down
feedback
to,
grant people.
Yeah.
yeah, if you want to be clear about screen time, you can try to self-monitor it as you go and keep your averages down. The other way that you can do it is put screen time on and give Shezzy the password and vice versa and set a limit there. But Shezzy's goal is different. She's just talked about her smartwatch because that was your main gripe, right, Grant? So
Yeah.
you can go one of two ways here, Grant. You can put screen time on and set a 2 hour limit for the certain, things that you want to limit and see how you go with that and give Shezzy the password. Or you can keep it and just be honest with us about how many times you override it. Or you can just try to, keep it in front of mind for the next month or two until we check in.
Yeah.
Your call.
I like that. I want to try and be in control of my own behaviors rather than have some sort of digital intervention. I want to see if I can do it on my own first, and then when I fail, I will go for the aids.
Do you know what, Grant? I was really hoping you'd say that because I think it'll just make for much better follow-up, won't it?
Yeah.
Whoa! Ooh! Who's throwing shade now?
No, I think that's good. My total screen time was 23 hours. How does that happen?
Oh, that must be over the week.
All right. So
see, and this is, I think you're both cottoning on to this here. This is one of the difficult parts about screen time, and I'm not just picking on Apple. All the Android devices are the same way. They don't make it easy. There's a focus app on your iPhone as well. I wrote an article about 3 months ago on this because it was like, I spent like a day trying to figure out how to use it. Couldn't figure it out. Somehow I ended up with a home screen that had something Capricornia on it or something. I don't even know how I got there, and I couldn't figure out how to get it off. I had to call my mate Charlie Brown, the tech expert Charlie Brown. I had to call him up and go, mate, how do I get this off? He's just laughing at me, right? So I think that they don't make it easy to use this stuff or interpret the data, and that's what you're finding here as well. So that's why we go with more objective things. If Shezzy's going, right, between 9 and 9, I'm not going to have my iPhone, my watch on. Yeah, that's very hard. Yeah, but it's a much more clear goal. And Grant's aiming for under 2 hours average daily screen time, which I think is very ambitious, but let's see how this goes.
Ooh, you naysayer, you negative Nancy. Eat my digital dust.
do you know what? If Grant's screen time on most of his social apps and YouTube were less, my screen time would also be less because I wouldn't be replying to all his emails and texts.
Excuses.
It's legit.
Look, Brad, this has been so much fun. It's starting to get uncomfortable, so I'm wanting to hang up a phone call. before I make any larger commitments that I'm unable to deliver.
It has been good.
But can I just point out, after all the bad parenting that we've just declared, in all honesty and transparency, I did build a cardboard fort outside, which was using our hands and our imagination.
You
The
did.
thing has a kitchen. It's got 2 bedrooms. Putting in a bathroom today. So
Yeah, it's a full...
I don't know if you want to use a cardboard bathroom.
No, because I have to clean it up. Brad, give yourself a massive plug. Where can people find you if they want to find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so unpluggedpsychologist.com.au or Unplugged Psychologist on all the socials. You can find me and what I do with speaking or in the clinic and books and all that sort of stuff. So come and find me.
Ironically, we can find the Unplugged Psychologist
Online.
on all social media platforms, which just
that.
makes it easier to get to you,
It
which
does.
we understand. Mate,
Yeah.
keep up
Cheers,
the great
Grant.
work. Any fears that you have about talking down to parents or making them feel bad or talking in too much geek speak are unfounded. Your books are easy to read. They're helpful guides. You know, it's not about shaming. You know, it's just giving us wonderful solutions that we can use in our everyday lives, mate. It's beautifully constructed. And thank God we got a bloke like you on our side as parents. So thanks for the good work that you do.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.